Hey, Helen here, your host. Great to have you along for the second season of The Beautiful Side of Grief, where we continue to hear from people from all walks of life who have faced or have been involved with heart-wrenching loss and who've come out the other side with so many positives to share with others. I know this may seem like an impossibility for you right here, right now, to be in that space. And believe me, I understand. I lost my own gorgeous 18-year-old daughter and only child in a car accident. Yet, here I am 4 years later, sharing my own journey and those of others in the most heartwarming and joyful way. Each and every one of my guests share their own beautiful insights and their strategies for getting through their grief. And through these stories, I hope you'll find your own way to deal with your grief in whatever form that may take. I'll pop my guest links and any free resources in the episode notes, along with my website address if you'd like to know more about the energy work I do, as that was my lifesaver in my own grief journey. Don't forget to subscribe and like so you can keep informed of each weekly episode. So now let's see who our guest is this week. My guest on today's episode of The Beautiful Side of Grief is Tricia Roos, who's a Dallas wife and mother who built her career coaching young athletes. Multiple state volleyball championships pale, however, next to what she gained through tragedy. Against the advice of medical experts, Tricia completed her pregnancy with a child diagnosed with a fatal chromosome condition. That season, her team won. The child in her grew, and eventually Tricia held and loved the daughter no one expected to live. Then, in 6 searing days, Tricia and her family rewrote the medical chapter on Trisomy 18, living out a story that galvanized the large high school where she worked in, the media in her city, and inspires her audience and readers today. We're going to delve into the book she's written, but she's also going to share her journey with us and the lessons she has learned about trust and hope, which is something that you can take away with you and learn from as well. If you've been affected by something similar and feel emotions that are overwhelming for you, please, I urge you to reach out and seek support so you're not alone in this grief. And I hope Tricia's own story, as it unfolds, will be a well of encouragement for you. And may your own journey through loss or whatever form of grief you may be experiencing be filled with love, light, and hope. So it is an absolute pleasure to have you with me today, Tricia.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. So I think it's awesome that you're able to share this incredible story and journey you had with Annabelle. Though I'm going to put my hand right up here and now and acknowledge that this is an area that I have little or no expertise in. So I welcome you to take the lead to provide our listeners with what you consider to be the information that they most need to hear about your journey and what you went through. So we want to do it justice. So feel free to do that at any stage. So let's start at the beginning. When you found out that you were pregnant with Annabelle, what was your home and work situation like then?
So at the time, we had a 3-year-old boy, and one day he came home asking for a lady baby, and we weren't sure exactly what that meant, but it translated into wanting a sibling. And so essentially at daycare, a boy that he was friends with all of a sudden kind of appeared with baby one day. And he realized that that was something that he also wanted, was to have his own baby. And, so that was an interesting way of, starting the conversation with my husband. And, at the time I was the director of admissions at a large Catholic school. I was the head volleyball coach. My husband was working. We had a busy 3-year-old. And we really hadn't discussed a second child yet. And that started the conversation, and we decided we were ready, with the pregnancy. And, once the baby was born, they'd be about 4 years apart. And we thought, this is perfect, And so when I found out I was pregnant, we went to those first few doctor's appointments and everything was fine. But it was at the 12-week appointment that my doctor actually offered that I do a blood test to find out the gender, because I'm a planner. I really wanted to know what the gender was. And so did the blood test in and out, didn't really think anything of it. And about a week later, I received a call from my doctor, and she let me know that the blood test revealed that it was a girl, but that she had trisomy 18. So I had never heard of this, my first question was, how do we fix this? What do I need to do to fix it? And she said, this is a fatal condition and we need to send you to a specialist right away. And so I proceeded the next day to go to another doctor because, some of those blood tests, it could be a false positive and they wanted to confirm and make sure, and we wanted to know. And so the specialist confirmed the diagnosis the next day. And I just remember it was so matter of fact. It was like, yep, it's correct. Trisomy 18. Do you want to, have an abortion and just move on to a healthy pregnancy later? And it was just so much information coming to us at once. And I remember just processing all of it, and a few days later talking to the same doctor. And I wondered if maybe he was recommending that because my health was at stake. And I came to learn that that was not the case, that my experience with the pregnancy would be the same whether or not she had trisomy 18. And he just said, don't you want your son to have a sibling? And I said, yes, of course, but this is also a sibling. And I think for me, my faith background, as well as being an athlete my whole life and coaching, I'm constantly telling teenagers, don't give up, keep going, try your hardest all the time. And I saw it personally as an opportunity for me to give it my all and provide, the best experience I could for her, whether that was just in pregnancy and it was a stillbirth, or she lived a day or an hour or months, or years. So we ended up announcing the decision to keep her and about what was going on with the pregnancy very quickly to friends and coworkers. And a week later, volleyball season started for me. So it's extremely busy. But with these teenage girls, it was an amazing experience where they just worked their hardest every day and made it a fun, positive environment with no whining, complaining, drama, which is really hard for teenagers, right? And they ended up winning the state championship that year in honor of her. And it was just a very emotional experience that they would work that hard and sacrifice for, her and for our family. And about a month later, I gave birth to her in December at the big hospital here in Dallas, and just surprised everybody that she was born alive. It wasn't supposed to happen. Everybody assumed it would be a stillbirth. And she also had a 2-chamber heart. So you just imagine breathing and functioning.
Wow.
Very difficult. But Annabelle was a fighter, and we fought for her, and we, provided the best that we could for her. And she died at 6 days old at home in my arms. And, obviously the grief is unimaginable. You never expect to be in a situation like that. But when I started writing and feeling called to write, I actually ended up titling the book When Wishes Change. And if you think about all the dreams and wishes that you have as a person and how desperately you want those to come true, and then when something doesn't come true and your wish changes, life is more about the way that you respond to those changes and pivot and move forward, even through tragedy. Mm-hmm. And I felt like that was a very appropriate name for the book because all of us through COVID have had to make extreme life changes, and a lot of people have had job changes and tragedies, and so many people have died from COVID that none of us wished for any of this to happen. But do we sit paralyzed in our homes and scared and cry, or do we figure out a way to move on and we figure out, all right, this may not be my wish right now, but I'm gonna wear a mask. I'm gonna protect myself. I'm gonna protect my family. I'm gonna respect others. I'm gonna get through it because that's what we have to do as humans to keep going. So I felt like that life experience through the grief has also really translated to a lot of other things going on in the world.
Okay, before we get to that, I love the title of the book, When Wishes Change, because like you say, it just symbolizes so much, not only your own journey, but anything else somebody can be going through. The second thing is what absolute strength and courage you must have had. So do you mind if I just rewind a little bit and just go and just tease out a couple of the things that you've said? So what was it that made you decide to go against medical advice? Because that's a big decision to make. And because I know it must be the most dreadful situation to be in, to have to make a choice like that. So can you just talk us through what you went through to make that choice?
Yeah, absolutely. I think personally for me, it was a faith decision. I really didn't feel like I wanted to end her life on my terms. I really wanted to be a decision that God made. And again, whether that meant a stillbirth and having to give birth to her at, 35 weeks pregnant or sometime along the road, I didn't want to have to be the one to make that decision of when her life ended. I thought, that's a big burden to carry. And I think I would have been stuck with the what if, because, now in hindsight, I got to meet her and hold her and smell her, and she was breathing and opened her eyes and never experienced pain. I mean, she was just the sweetest little thing. And I I can't imagine living with the what if. And the other thing is I learned very quickly, even though you'll find on websites or Wikipedia, trisomy 18 is considered incompatible with life. Once I got into some Facebook communities and learned more about the condition, although most children are severely disabled, it's, trisomy 1 is Down syndrome, which is more familiar to us than trisomy 18. There are lots of children out there living great lives. And even though they're disabled, they bring joy to their family. They, are amazing human beings and bring light into the world. And again, if it was possible for her to live years and I would be her caretaker and guide her, I was okay with that. I was ready to just let, that will be done and meet her and see what happens.
I love that because it's almost like the fact that you were carrying her was a gift, and it's a gift that you needed to honor right through. Mm-hmm. So I think that's really, really beautiful. So is this a genetic defect that runs through genes? So was there a possibility that if you chose to have another sibling, that this sibling could also be affected by this?
It was not genetic in the sense that it was something that could have happened again with, we would have had the same chance having a trisomy 18 baby, which is one in many, many millions in the next pregnancy. So there was not a higher chance of it happening again. It's just kind of a fluke thing that happens in conception with an extra chromosome going one direction. And it was nothing that we could have prevented. There's no cure, as well as there's no higher chance of it happening again with another pregnancy.
Oh, that's really good to understand. So with the girls, obviously at school and the volleyball and, your friends and family around you, it sounds like you decided to tell them very early on in the piece what was happening. Was that so that they could just be a part of this journey with you to support you, or what was your reasoning behind telling people quite early in the piece?
So partially it was that, but also, again, I had gone through a very healthy pregnancy with my son. Nothing wrong happened. It was easy. So I actually announced that I was pregnant to my team and to my coworkers and friends probably around 8 or 9 weeks along, so a little bit earlier than the first trimester. And, partially I was feeling really sick. It was obvious I'm a very upbeat person with a lot of energy that I was falling asleep at my desk, and I needed a good explanation for that. And so to go back and now go back to work and still be pregnant and people asking about it, and having to tell this story, 800 occasions separately.
Yes.
I felt like I just needed everybody to know at one time. And you could receive the email and tell everybody that you knew that needed to know or that knew me. But I just needed that story out there one time because I didn't want weird rumors or, how it is, like stories get twisted and told incorrectly. And being pregnant, it's physical. Like you could start seeing, a baby showing from my stomach. And I just needed those in my community to know what was going on. Because, especially out in public, or if there was somebody that didn't know, you immediately get, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And then it gets a little awkward because they didn't expect that. They're like, oh my gosh, you're having a baby. This is so exciting. I'm like, yeah. And then maybe you start to explain, what's happening, and they feel bad, and that makes you feel bad. So I think I was just honestly fearful of those conversations in person. and thought that putting it in writing would make me feel a little bit less anxiety to be able to get the story out my way and how I wanted to say it so that everybody knew what was going on.
That's such good advice because, like you say, get the story out your way, how you want people to hear it with the information you want to be able to share. And I think that's such a really proactive approach to it all because you're in control of it. And like you say, there's nothing worse than having to repeat the same thing 800 times, yeah. And I still come across people that don't realize I've lost my daughter and ask how she is. And yeah, it is awkward. Yeah. But so let's talk about now the things that you found really good support for you when you were going through this, because no matter how much you want to be brave and strong about it, the fact is that you've got this probably yo-yo thing going on in your head and you can feel it in your body. So, what tools worked best for you?
The best thing for me, I'm such a people person, was I needed other people to speak to me and be in my life that had gone through the same experience. And I particularly wanted that person that was like on the other side of it. Like, what was this like for you and how are you doing now? And I'm a tell me what to expect type person. And so if I'm about to have a surgery or if something is about to happen that could be painful, I want to know the worst case scenario, the best case scenario, and everything so that I am fully prepared for whatever comes my way, especially with having a baby. I was like, tell me all the things, with friends before me that had children, because I just want to be ready. And I needed to find people just like me. So I really sought out through friends and family, anyone that I could find through acquaintances that had gone through a similar situation. And that was extremely helpful for me. One of my husband's coworkers' wives, friends from college or something, knew somebody that had a baby with trisomy 18 and she was born alive and she actually lived for about 6 months. And I needed to hear her story. I needed to know the pain and the suffering and the joy and everything in between. And I remember in that call, we cried, we laughed. I mean, all of the emotions came out in that conversation. And as hard as it was to hear, I just needed to feel prepared. And, I know that I'm an introvert or an extrovert, and that's more natural for me. But I really believe for people that are more introverted that maybe don't want to have that call with somebody else, this is what I recommend: listening to a podcast or getting in a Facebook community of others that are going through the exact type of situation you are, or as close as can be, because maybe it's more therapeutic for you to write and just write your emotions and say, hey, I'm having a bad day today. Has anyone else been through a time where you just couldn't work and you were immobilized and you just cried all day? And you know that there are people to respond. Yep, I just had one of those the other day. Or yes, when I was in the same stage as you, I went through that as well. Because you need someone to tell you it's going to be okay. And that's, for me, when I started writing, and now I feel like I'm 6 years after, I feel like I'm in a better position to not break down and cry myself when I talk about my daughter and to talk about what we went through with our grieving, because I've processed the grief and I've let enough time go by and I've written about it and I've gone to therapy. And I know there's people out there that need that support and need that voice to hear that it will be okay when you are in a place where you are so lost and hopeless, that hearing that may make your day a little bit better than it started.
Being so lost and helpless, that's the exact opposite of what you described yourself beforehand, isn't it? You're this person who's by the sounds of it, a real go-getter, has everything organized, knows exactly what is happening on the detail and the bigger scheme. So for you to be able to articulate that and know that you needed support around that and that those feelings and emotions are real, because sometimes people forget, they still expect us to be the old self. Yet, what we're going through is the exact opposite. You can't describe how it just derails the person that you thought you knew you were, like that. So let's go now to the arrival of this little precious soul. And, How did you cope during that time? Because you were going in sort of not really knowing what to expect, were you? But, having several different options of what the outcome may be, but then to get to see this beautiful little girl.
Well, when she was born, we had a C-section because they believed that was the best chance of survival, because they believed going through the birth canal would be, strenuous. And since she had a 2-chamber heart, they were concerned. And it took about 4 minutes for her to start breathing. And so I remember just laying there waiting and waiting and waiting, and just so much emotion and so many people. Just, I remember the movement in the room. Like, it was just quiet, but extremely focused. And then we heard her cry. And it was this tiny little lion cub sound, because she was such a small little human. She was only 3 pounds, 13 ounces. But I knew then, like, I remember taking this huge deep breath knowing, okay, she's alive. And we literally lived in every single minute and every moment. And when you think about your life and like, today I'm just going to hang out, maybe chill, I'm going to take a day off. I mean, we were minute by minute. There was no minute off from her life, just staying completely focused to her breathing and what she needed. And she lived 150 hours, and every one of those hours mattered and counted. And we sang happy birthday to her every single day of her life to just commemorate the fact that she made it another day. And so it really gives you a different perspective on your life, right? How precious it is and how much we were able to like soak in every single minute with her, because we knew it had a time limit. We knew that with her heart, there was no possible chance of surgery. She was only 3 pounds. That would be extremely dangerous and impossible. And so, much like someone maybe in their older years on hospice, and you just do everything you can to make life comfortable for them as you're preparing for them to move on. It was similar to that, but for a baby and for a newborn. And, I wanted to know everything about her. I wanted to keep her on my chest at all times. I wanted, to talk to her. I wanted her brother to meet her. I wanted everybody in the family to meet her and have the opportunity to share in her life. And so we were very blessed with the hospital. They gave us kind of special privileges in recovery for all of our family to come in and meet her, because they were like, she could only live a couple hours. Like, yes, bring them in, let them meet her. And then she kept living, and then she kept going. And then the next day she was alive, and the next day she was alive. And with every step of the way, I think that honestly, my coaching and athletic background got me through some of that, because we teach our athletes, when you're in the zone and you get in a competition, that's all that matters. You forget about the distractions around you. You get really laser focused on the task at hand, which is whatever, running a race or playing a baseball game or a volleyball game. And so I was running that race. I was so laser focused on taking care of her that any kind of sadness or grief really wasn't happening as it was in my pregnancy, because here she was alive and breathing, totally surprising us and doctors and nurses. And I remember one particular morning I woke up and was in tears and was just a mess. And I remember saying, nope, today is a gift. She's still alive. Like, you get back out there and you do the best that you can today. And if and when she passes away, you can grieve then, because you're losing time. If you're, again, going back to a sport, if you're sitting on the sideline because the other team just scored a touchdown crying because they scored, the game, there's still time on the clock. There is still time for you to get back up and brush yourself off and start up the offense and go. And until that clock ends, I tell my son all the time, you never cry in the middle of the game, because you fight for the victory. And if you're sad at the end because you lost and that's heartbreaking to you, cry in the car on the way home. I get it. But let's not cry in the middle of the game. And to me, when she was alive, that was the middle of the game. This is what I, had prepared for, to care for this child. So it was strange. And I believe there was a lot that God was giving me, that strength and wisdom along the way to know what to do, to know what she needed, to know how to help her, because I don't think I could have done that by myself.
Wow, wonderful analogies there that I think everybody can relate to. And I love that you celebrated every hour of her 150 hours. That is so, so special, because it's easy to flip the other way, like you said, to go into that grief instead of actually loving and appreciating this beautiful gift of life, even if it's just for such a short time. Mm-hmm. So that in itself is so incredibly inspirational, and I love it. And I also recall seeing a little clip of your son holding her, and he was singing to her, wasn't he? And
yep.
Yeah, and I just think those experiences help people forge those beautiful memories and make this person real, and make them feel valued, that there was a role for them here now. So that was fantastic. What is a bigger purpose that you see around only having her for those 6 precious days?
I believe that in writing the book, it's creating continuous purpose for her life, and hopefully be a beacon of light for others that are going through similar situations. One of the things I really thought about was a lot of stories and movies and books, there's always like that climax and that conflict and something that happens. But so many of these stories, there's a miracle, something miraculous happens and everything changes and all their wishes and dreams come true. And if I can share my story with someone and let them know that although there wasn't a miracle, that she didn't live forever and her heart was healed and she still died. I mean, not a lot of great stories, Disney movies end in the, character dying. But in our situation, in our case, maybe our wish didn't come true of that healthy baby and that healthy pregnancy, but her life still had tremendous value. And we were able to love her for 6 days. And that was the life God intended for her. It wasn't supposed to be longer than that. And if my purpose out of that is to share our story with other people, to help other grieving parents, or to help others going through something difficult in their lives, and just that opportunity to reflect and say, okay, this wish didn't come true. I've been sitting here laying in my grief for months about it. How can I take this bad situation and make it good and move on with my life? Because I just think that you lose so many opportunities if you think that way. So I could still be sitting here mad right now and grieving, and that my daughter was stolen from me, and I can be bitter and angry about it, or I can say, all right, where's the bigger purpose and plan, and how can I make sure that I'm fulfilling that plan and helping others? Because it makes me feel better. It helps me with my grief if I'm able to share and pass that on and help somebody else. And then I would hope that they would then be able to get through their grief and then pass to somebody else in the future as well.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I love how you describe it in your book, When Wishes Change, about how your wish for a healthy baby girl changed into something more beautiful than you could ever have dreamed. And I think that's the essence about you, is that you just look for those positives. Come on. Let's see what this opportunity is going to bring us. Let's see where it's going to head. Yes, we know there's a really sad part of it, and it's a really tough journey for us to be going on. But I think in that itself, there are so many lessons that we can take from that and apply to any part of our life. And I love that. I absolutely love that. So your book, so is it your story right the way through, or do you share within that the coping mechanisms, the things that really work for you? Just share a little bit more about what our readers or anybody listening can get out of your book.
Yeah, the book is actually both. And so it is our story, kind of starting with Mommy, I Want a Lady Baby. That's actually the first line in the book, and going through that journey. But it's broken into 3 parts. And so part 1 is just everything you wish for, like being very hopeful and having that big dream of the perfect life and the 2 healthy kids and, all these things falling into line. And then getting blasted with this news and realizing this is not how my life is going to be. Wishes are changing. And there's that battle in the book about how I'm accepting it sometimes and I'm way against it other times. right? I'm fighting through the emotions and through the change. And then I have the volleyball in there. I have and you don't have to know much about volleyball. It's not like super technical in the book, but just the idea that having community and having others rally around you and support you can be extremely therapeutic and helpful. And really it ends up being a great distraction, but it's a healthy kind of distraction. And then when you get into part 2, it is literally living in the moment, in the minute by minute, and how precious each minute of her life was, and just experiencing just her life and the ups and downs and the things that we went through from doctors and the hospital and nurses and their support and love. And then really part 3 is that journey of healing. And so it really summarizes the last few years and what I've learned. So the good and the bad. I mean, I learned a lot of things I think I did wrong in grieving and after losing her. And I think that I would have.
Are you able just to tease that out a little bit more for us?
Yeah. So, I never sought any kind of professional help. I literally had a C-section about, 6 days later she died. And then we had a funeral or a celebration of light service. And so I went back to work 3 weeks after that. So way before I ever had to go, I just showed up at work one day and I said, I'm back. And I did not go to a therapist. I jumped into my work into the busiest time of the year and was working 12-hour days and taking care of my son. And I had my husband and just jumping back into life. And then I was pregnant again 6 months later, and then went through another pregnancy almost kind of the same time of year, which was difficult. And then when you have a newborn, you're living, the life of no sleep and going through all the stages of, the infancy of your child. And the grief really hit me hard about 4 years later. So this was about 2 years ago. And for better or for worse, maybe that's what I needed at the time, to just jump back into life as hard as I could and be distracted. But I do know that by putting off grief for that many years took a lot of work 4 years later to get through. And I just wish that somebody would have really encouraged me a little bit more to seek professional help, because I thought I could do it on my own. I thought I could counsel myself. I thought by just talking to some friends occasionally about it was enough. And I don't think it was. And so I stress that in the book about getting professional help. And then I also talk a lot about how I truly believe that experiencing her loss has enriched our family in ways we never could have imagined. And you don't think of a tragic event being something great, positive, but there are takeaways from it. I think that my son is more compassionate. I think that getting to experience her life and seeing the faith of a child through that time and how he went through experiencing grief, and it was very black and white for him. He was like, well, she's healed and she's in heaven and she's healthy now, so it's okay. She's okay. And it was beautiful watching it through his eyes. And now I watch the way that he takes care of his, younger sister, the child that we had after that. And although they fight and they are not perfect at all, he really takes care of her. I mean, he really, really loves her so much and takes care of her. And it doesn't mean that he wouldn't have taken care of her if he didn't experience having another sister die. But I do think that in just watching him grow up, that he has a special kind of compassion for special needs children and for his sister and for life that maybe other kids are not capable of having at that young of an age, because they haven't experienced the same kind of situation that he has.
Some really beautiful takeaways there. And I like what you said about, not that you poured yourself straight into work, but it's kind of like some of us think, and I'm very guilty of this, like I have all the information, I know what I'm dealing with here, so let's just get on with it, okay? Like I, again, held off going and seeking help and talking to somebody. And I think it's because we think we can deal with it. But what you're talking about when you have such deep grief like this is you're talking about really deep, deep emotions. And one day they will out themselves because you're carrying that deep grief within you. And is that what you felt at the time? Like, it came to a point where you just had to let that grief go?
Absolutely. And I can't honestly tell you what the trigger was at the time. I think that it was just maybe life slowed down a little bit. So, our younger child was not an infant newborn anymore. So she was a little bit more independent, and our son was a little bit more independent. And it was kind of during a time when work was a little bit slower. And it was right after, shortly after the anniversary of her birthday and death. And it happened to both my husband and I. I mean, this grief just snuck up on us. And it wasn't until I saw a professional therapist where she really unpacked that grief and where some of these emotions were coming from and why. We talked about some other life changes that had happened in the same, 4-year period that highly affected the way that I was handling the situation and the anxiety. And so just getting someone else to say, an outsider that did not know the situation, but heard more about me, to walk me through that was incredible. And so, I'm glad I did that, and I wish I would have done that earlier. But again, I am where I am now, and that's okay. And it's okay if that creeps up on me in a couple years or tomorrow. Yeah. That's the other thing I think I've realized is that it's never like this is a cure or this will end. I was at a funeral about a year and a half ago for a girl that passed away from the school I worked at. 16 years old, died of the flu. And it wasn't until her mother got up and started speaking about the experience of losing a daughter and telling some stories that I just lost it. I mean, I thought I've arrived. I'm at that point. It's been 5 years. I need to go out of respect for this family that I know and support. You feel great when you can look back and know at a funeral you have family and friends supporting you. I knew that personally from my own experience, so I wanted to be there for them. And, I was with my best friend on my right and a coworker on my left, and thank God it wasn't a complete stranger because I just started crying so hard in his jacket. And it was kind of embarrassing, but it was just, it was a trigger. Like the mother speaking about her daughter dying it got me hard. And, I bounced back. I said, you know what? I had a moment, and having a moment like that is okay. And I'm sure that hundreds of people in the pews behind me saw this girl just sobbing, and she might be a little crazy, but I know that's going to happen more times in my life, and I've arrived where I'm okay with that, and I will get through it when it happens, and I'm not going to be mad at myself for allowing it to happen.
Yeah. I remember a time when I was in the supermarket and somebody just asked me how I was doing. That simple one question was enough just to create a flood of tears. You never know where it's going to come from or what the triggers are going to be. And I think, like you said, this is a lifelong thing. You don't just get over this experience and that. What are some ways that you found from your own personal experience that you can help a friend deal with grief? Because that's where people often feel stuck. They don't know how to best support somebody going through something really difficult.
So in the book, I say something that I don't want it to be offensive to anyone else that has had any other kind of loss, but one thing I know that I did not like was if someone was talking to me, it was like, yeah, I know when I lost my grandpa, I felt like that too. And to me, comparing the loss of my child to the loss of your grandpa who lived a really long life, I know that you have emotions and you're sad, and so am I. But especially back at the most vulnerable time of my grief, I think you really just need to have somebody that listens to you and doesn't compare. We're not comparing your grief versus my grief, or, don't come in and tell me all your stories of everybody that's died so you feel like you can relate to me. Just like listen and let it be and not try to compare. And I don't want that to mean that no one else's story is as, impactful. I mean, I lost my grandpa not that long ago, and I was incredibly sad. I was very close to him. But, if you're trying to help somebody, I think it's more about listening, especially in the early stages. And it's okay if you don't know what to say. It's just listen. And then the other thing I think that is helpful is typically there's a lot of support at the beginning. You've got flowers, so many letters and calls. And I remember right around the 3-month mark, I remember that when you don't have the cards coming in and people at work are back to normal and everybody's moving on, I felt very stuck and lost. And I often give advice to others that ask me that question. Set a reminder on your phone or on a calendar, maybe text them after 3 months, and then maybe 6 months and 9 months, and maybe at the year anniversary. Because there are definitely times when, people have all that support in the beginning, and then as it tails off, you're still grieving, you're still sad, maybe even more so because it's really hit you and everybody else is just doing their thing. And you can't be mad about that. Everybody else has to live their life, and that's totally acceptable. But I think it means a lot to the person who lost, somebody, particularly to just let them know you're thinking about them or thinking about their loved one. And the other thing I will say, and I know this is very true with other people who have lost children, for me anyway, is it's okay to talk about her. So, it's almost like sometimes people acted like, even though they know she existed, they don't want to bring it up or ask questions because they think it might be too triggering. And I have no problem, if I'm talking about something, I'm like, oh yeah, I think that happened when I was pregnant with Annabelle, or, oh yeah, I had a gallbladder surgery right after Annabelle, a few months later. And I also want to make sure that my kids are able to talk about her. And my son has always been great. He says he has 2 sisters, one in earth and one in heaven. And that just throws off people because it's like, ooh, you're going to talk about that? And I'm like, yeah, he's going to talk about that because he loved her, he knew her, and that is his sister. And so is Andy, the one on earth. And Andy wants to ask questions about her big sister that she never met or knew. But we find it's important as a family to bring her name up every day in our prayers and in just, different kinds of conversations so that is not uncomfortable for our kids to talk about. And we don't want it to be uncomfortable for our friends to ask about or talk about as well.
That's such great advice. Thank you, Tricia. Really, really special to help people get through that and know how to manage that. What gives you comfort and hope after losing a child?
The comfort for me is like eternal life. I actually had a cousin that died from COVID a few weeks ago.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And obviously, I know the grief her mother's going through. It's different. She was 41, so you think, man, that's just a life gone too soon. But at the same time, I understand the grief of losing a child and the difficulty of that. But my first thought in situations like that, when my step-parents passed away, when my cousin, anyone else, I think, ooh, there was Annabelle, or maybe they're getting to hold her or meet her or see her. And that to me brings comfort in knowing that she's healed, she's healthy, she's in a better place. And also the comfort in knowing that it is okay and that I can learn, like you said, having those tools and those resources. If I have a bad day or there's a trigger, it's a lot more comforting when you have learned about some of those things to do than not feeling equipped and not feeling like you have anyone to talk to, anywhere to go. Because I know I can always turn to my Facebook group and I can turn to certain friends that I've made that have lost children if I'm having a bad day. Like I know where I can go if I need assistance. And it's really important that you have those outlets.
Yeah, even if you don't ever end up using them, it's just knowing that they're there if you do. Yeah, that's great advice. So we're just going to wind things up, but I want to ask your advice on if somebody's listening to this and they're inspired to share their own story, but they're going, how on earth do I even begin to go about this? What would your recommendations be?
Well, it depends on what kind of platform they're comfortable with. So, one girl that I know who had two boys and a girl, the girl passed away. It's a very, very tragic accident. Now she's had another boy, a fourth child. She is very purposeful in displaying pictures of her daughter amongst her pictures with her son. It's very obvious to me she wants her remembered, and her way of doing it through social media, through Facebook or through Instagram, helps her feel like she's keeping the memory alive of her daughter. For me personally, I felt really compelled to write. I thought it was therapeutic. I thought it was helpful. I didn't know if I was going to be able to finish it or not, but I was sure hoping I could, and I did. And, whether the book sells millions of copies or 10, I'm hopeful that the impact will help someone, that they can read the book and not feel alone, and they can feel like they can get through, anything that they're going through that's tragic. And so it depends on their platform. And maybe they're a talker like me, and they want to be able to reach out to a nonprofit or an organization and be be a voice to someone. I think everybody has their own gifts and their talents, and the way that they can share those gifts and talents is all going to materialize very differently. And I think that I'm starting to find my gifts and to find ways to share. And in my job, again, I was a coach, I was a director of admissions, I was in charge of a lot of events. I love to talk and I love to share. And so even having the ability to come on here and share my story and pray and hope that it has an impact on someone really gives me comfort and hope. And again, helps with my grieving through the loss of my daughter. And it was the same with writing the book. It's the same with being able to speak in public. I've gotten the opportunity to do public speaking. I'm continuing to be a public speaker. And I have watched people in the room have those breakdowns, and I'm watching them, and I know they're relating in that moment. And I stay after and I speak to everyone I can. And when we can share, this happened to you too, and where are you at in your grief, and how are you? I think it's super powerful. So I think everybody has to figure out what the best platform is to share or to be a resource to others. And that will be up to them to know what they're comfortable with. But I think there's definitely many outlets in this day and age to share your story.
And it doesn't have to be just through writing a book. So I love that you shared, those different platforms and how they work for people. For me, mine's podcasting. That's exactly what I was drawn to do. And it gives me comfort every single day to be able to share stories like your own. I couldn't think of anything that fills my heart more. So, I'm so, so grateful for that. So we're going to start wrapping up now. So I would love to know, what is the best thing that's happened to you either today or this past week?
Oh boy. So honestly, I think that seeing the book sales do really well has been really encouraging, that the book is out, the story is out. So the book came out, the first week of September basically was when people started ordering. Of course, then it takes a little while to receive the book. And then the last week, finally, I'm getting some Amazon reviews, and they've all been extremely positive, which has been like very humbling to me. But I think the fact that I've seen that it's making an impact is really making every day brighter, because, it sat on my computer for almost 2 years. And I wondered so many times, can I do this? Am I brave enough to get this story out there? Am I going to be able to do it right and speak it out the right way, how I intend it to? And so now that it's been like 2 years in the making and it's out in the world, and now people have received it and read it and there's good feedback coming in, it's just rewarding to see that. It's been great.
Congratulations. Really, seriously, that must be the best feeling, like you say, to have been nurturing it for that time and then to finally give it wings and let it do its thing. That's wonderful. So that may in fact be the answer to my next question, but what is the proudest moment in your life to date?
Overall, it's really my family. I mean, I know that my time is limited and even having my kids in the house with me. So until Cameron and Andy are 18 or graduate from high school and they live, outside of the home at college or wherever, I really feel like being able to teach them and to learn and to grow in their faith and just physically, emotionally, and mentally is really important. And as moms, we all have our moments every single day where we believe we're failing and we're not doing a great job. But I also am trying to do my best to find the moments where maybe I'm doing something right. And maybe I said something encouraging that was helpful to my son. And maybe, today I made my daughter feel beautiful, not because of, her appearance, but because of the kind words that she said. So, I feel like I have to do the best job I can in raising these two children and, being a good wife and trying to make our family be able to do good in the world, each in their own ways. So I think that's really the proudest moment. I mean, the book was a huge accomplishment, but then I spent a lot of years coaching and watching development happen in teenagers and reaching their goals. I absolutely love coaching and teaching. I do a lot of private lessons still since I'm not actually coaching my own team anymore. And that really fulfills me because I see them growing in confidence, especially young girls. They need a push in confidence almost 100 times a day. So that's a lot of fun too.
Oh, that's great. And I think you probably even preempted and answered my next question, which is like when you're going through those moments, what is your go-to? Like we have an expression here in New Zealand, like when your day turns to custard or when moments turn to custard, how do you pivot out of them? How do you switch it around and get back on track?
Well, I have a couple answers because I've really started feeling out like self-discovery of like what makes me happy. And a couple of days a week, I play tennis in the morning, and that's a really fun time for me because I love working out, but I love camaraderie with other people. Today, in just a few hours, I get to coach my daughter's soccer team. It's a bunch of 5-year-old girls, but I love it. I have so much fun with them and teaching them. And so, on Wednesdays and then on Saturdays, game days, I get to be with them. And then sometimes, when we have a day with no practices or activities, there's a little local pool that we go to with friends and just enjoy watching our kids swim and hanging out with people. And so, I think the common denominator there is people and relationships. And so if every day I am able to, work with other people and have time with friends, with family, with teammates, that is always my go-to is the personal relationships that I have in my life.
Oh, that's great. So I'm pleased I still asked that question because that was a great takeaway. So what would you like to leave our listeners with today?
Well, I mean, I definitely feel that I would love for anyone to either read the book or pass it on to someone, purchase it for somebody that is going through a difficult time in hopes that it can help them. The other thing I've started realizing is that since social media is such a big part of our lives these days, my Instagram, I have really focused in on trying to make it really positive and have inspirational quotes and thoughts and pictures and just things to brighten someone's day. And so as you're just scrolling and following, all these different celebrities and different things that are somewhat mindless, I think it's really nice to have a little bit of spice in there of encouraging words and inspiration to hopefully lighten up your day. So the book is called When Wishes Change. The Instagram handle is When Wishes Change. I even have a TikTok, which is super new to me. And there's a great video on TikTok about our daughter. And then the last one posted is a makeup tutorial with my 5-year-old. That is hilarious. And it's just out there to be a light, right? Just be fun. And then it's the same on Facebook. It's When Wishes Change is the group. So, for me, I've tried over the last few years to follow more inspirational people instead of just mindless celebrities or, other news outlets because news oftentimes is very depressing, unfortunately. And I just hope that maybe through following some of those platforms, it can brighten up somebody's day.
wonderful takeaways there. Tricia, you've just been an absolute shining light to have on the episode today and to speak about something that could have easily have destroyed your life. Instead, you've just turned it into this massive, massive positive. And I'm so grateful to you for doing that. So thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to share. It makes me happy. It's a great opportunity.
Wonderful. And any listeners, we will have all those links to social media in the episode notes. So don't feel that you had to write them all down very, very quickly. Yeah, they'll definitely be available. So, everyone today, take care.
Hey, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode today, be sure to share it with others. Hit the subscribe or like button so you can be notified of each weekly episode. Also, let me know how I'm doing, especially if there's more you'd like to know that perhaps we didn't get time to touch on today or in past episodes. And if you're after resources to help you out on this journey or more about the energy healing work I do, hit the Healing to Be You link. That's the word healing, 2, letter B, letter U.com. So until next time, be kind to you and thank you for joining us on the beautiful side of grief.